Hello and welcome to Off the Fence, brought to you in association with Bet365. This is, of course, your weekly rundown of all things jump racing, and as always, I am joined by Barry Geraghty and Tony Keenan, and we're going to get stuck straight in because we've got loads to look forward to. The action at this time of year comes thick and fast, we've got plenty to rattle through. But first, we're going to take a look back at the last 7 days of jump racing in the UK and Ireland. And of course, all eyes were on Ascot for the Porsche Long Walk Hurdle, which was round 2 of Paisley Park versus Thyme Hill, and a load of other nice horses in the bunch as well. And it went the way of Paisley Park in a brilliant race. And Barry, it's kind of, I wanted to talk to you about this. I mean, just in terms of a race and the staying division in general, the fact that these two are lining up against each other, sort of already they've met twice and it's 1-1 now. It's brilliant for racing, isn't it? And the race itself, I thought, if that doesn't get your heart beating a bit faster, then I'm not sure what else will.
No, it was a brilliant finish and a brilliant race all the way through. Roscana as well, being on their tail as well, just added to it. But Paisley Park obviously got in a little bit of trouble turning in, got shuffled back, and then came on with that, trademark finish that he has. And to do Thyme Hill after the last laid on, you could see Richard Johnson's body language. He was sick. But it was a great race. Thyme Hill, on the other hand, he travelled a bit too well, pulled a little hard early. Probably Novice had a few hurdles, so he will improve the experience. But it was the old dog for the hard road. It was a brilliant finish, and to see Paisley Park come home like that, he still retains so much the ability that he had all last season before he disappointed at the festival.
Yeah, I mean, afterwards, I know you're a big Thyme Hill fan, Barry, but for me, I wonder if he's, for a staying hurdler, is he a touch almost too exuberant? Like, he's so careful when he jumps, and he's not, I don't get the impression he's that laid back, which is what, if you listen to the likes of Ruby Walsh or yourself or the many other experienced jockeys who've ridden good staying hurdlers, they say they almost need to switch off, just find that off switch. And I'm worried now that maybe Thyme Hill doesn't have that off switch in a race.
Well, he's only 6, so he has time. But Paisley Park, English Drever, Big Bucks, they're the real staying types, and they race behind the bridle, they race lazily, and they finish well. And Thyme Hill was just a bit keen early for Dickie, and he probably gave away his chance by pulling so hard. He missed a couple of hurdles too as a result of that as well. So he has a lot to improve on, but he has age on his side. He's only 6, so there's improvement in him between now and the spring. But it's very hard to see past Paisley Park at the minute in a war of attrition, which you're going to have come the festival.
Yeah, and it sounds like now we actually won't see Paisley. We won't see the rematch again. We won't see Thyme Hill potentially until the festival, so that'll be round 3. And it just goes to show when you have these matchups between horses in certain divisions, what a thrill it is. And I think the racing at the weekend really summed that up. Obviously, we haven't seen many of the Irish staying hurdlers come over here. And just in terms of the betting with Bet365 for the stayers hurdle, you've got Paisley Park at 11-4. You've got Thyme Hill at 7-2 and Sire de Burley at 7-1. Tony, just to bring you in very briefly there, in terms of, do you genuinely think, get off the fence, do you think Sire de Burley will be able to put it up to the likes of Thyme Hill and Paisley Park?
Yes, I would say he would be able to. Yeah, you can make a case that Barry's kind of made it there, that both of these Ascot horses could come out on top in the 3 match. We've already had the rematch, I suppose. But Sire de Burley would have done a lot better time than in the Pertemps final last year than the Stayers Hurdle horses did. I also think Fury Road is a very interesting horse. You can make a case that he was the best horse in the Albert Bartlett last year. There wasn't a lot between 4 of them there that pulled a long way clear of the 5th. Fury Road came from a little bit further back than the 3 that beat him, and he also had the race off the rail a bit. He'd be a horse that should like a war of attrition. So possibility of Sire de Burley and Fury Road meeting at Leopardstown next week, and also the Storyteller is possibly in the mix there as well. I don't know that he may not go over hurdles now Christmas, but there's a possibility he'll go for the Stayers Hurdle. I don't think he'd want a Gold Cup trip, and I'm not sure he'd be good enough. But just on the point there, I'd like to commend the connections there. We've already had these 2 horses meet twice this season. It's not even the end of December, which is absolutely brilliant. But sadly, it is the exception. And to be honest with you, I know I'm supposed to be all happy, clappy and positive with this, but let's be quite honest with you, like up until Christmas, or up until last Saturday, December has been an absolutely awful month in terms of competitiveness of racing. And we're going to be facing into January, which is traditionally another awful month. Christmas hopefully is going to redeem the thing, but broadly speaking, I don't like this whole festivalisation of racing. Particularly in Ireland too. The Dublin Racing Festival, to me, I would actually be an opponent of it more so than anything else. I think I much preferred when Leopardstown had a couple of meetings in January, good meetings, Champion Hurdle, what used to be the old Pierce Hurdle, leading on to the Gold Cup. I think it worked better. Because I think what has happened now, and we've seen it in the last couple of years, the Dublin Racing Festival, you're at the risk of the weather with Leopardstown, that the ground can come up very fast, and it has come up very fast the last couple of years. Had the water, the bejesus out of it on the Saturday evening this year gone to make it kind of half safe for them on the Sunday, which again isn't ideal. And we saw the sort of particularly I think it was in the year end, Violand went on to win both bumpers, those two meetings. A lot of horses didn't perform going from the two meetings. So yeah, that we might kind of take bigger takeaway on just the overall picture. But one other small thing I'd say about Paisley Park, he's another one of these horses with the issue with the heart. And just from a betting person's point of view, sometimes maybe are you better ignoring these things altogether. They're such a hard thing to put a figure on. We have no data on it. We have no real feel for it at all. Just have to put a little bit of trust in the trainer and maybe looking at his back form and just saying, like, was he maybe the bet on Saturday ahead of Time Hill? Although just that there was so little between them though. But just that whole thing about the heart, maybe not the thing to be hanging your hat on as analysing the race.
Yeah, totally agree. And I agree with you, really, the competitiveness of racing and the whole everyone aiming for certain festivals. Like, I think, the long walks, I just thought that was the best race we've seen all year, and that's two horses going head to head for a second round, and yeah, it's brilliant. But in terms of what else we saw at Ascot, we saw Al Arp, the Henderson team, make a very impressive chasing debut. Barry, how rare would it be for Nicky to throw a horse into a race like that so early on in sort of that chasing career?
I suppose I wouldn't call it rare as such. Simon Sigg won that race 8 years ago on his first number of fences. If Nicky feels he has horse who is good enough and jumps well enough at home, Ascot's such a big test, so it's a sign of faith of Nicky in the horse that he'd run him there, and he was proved right because it was a great performance. Fiddle on the Roof, he's a good yardstick. I know he's not top class, he's been beaten plenty, and he's probably underperformed for what a lot of people thought he was potentially capable of, but for ours to go there on his first run around a big track like that, taking on a more experienced rival and beat him, and he made a couple of mistakes early on, which he's entitled to do on his first run. So for me, it was a good performance. I don't think it's going to have Envoy Allen shaking in his boots, but you'd have to take note, and he's definitely a contender.
Yeah, well, he's 16-1 with Bet365 now for that March Novices Chase, and he's clearly a work in progress. That was what I sort of noted. I thought, well, he's just taking the right steps in the right direction at this point, but hopefully he'll be able to take a further step forward relatively soon. But also on the same card, we got to see My Drogo for the Skelton team, now 20-1 for the Supreme Novices with Bet365. Barry, you rode the dam of My Drogo. Many happy memories there for you?
I've some happy memories and some sad memories. I won on her in Ascot. I just started on the job with Nicky. I wasn't long on the job, and she won nicely in Ascot. And I rode it in Wetherby. She was 7-4 favourite in a listed mare's hurdle, and I went the wrong side of her marker turning in on front, and she would have won, and I got 12 days for my troubles. So wasn't the happiest camper leaving Wetherby that day.
No, and she should have been your 1,000th winner, shouldn't she, according to your book?
Yeah, she would have been my 1,000th winner, but I went the wrong way. Obviously, I had to wait a few days to Kempton on
Are you
Monday.
impressed with my homework? That is good homework, right?
That's very good homework. Well impressed, Vanessa. You've been paying attention when you're listening to the audio of my book, so...
Yeah, a dedication to true colours right there, if ever you saw it. But in terms of My Drogo himself, what did you make of that performance? I mean, actually, just to summarise, what I thought was really interesting is afterwards, the Skeleton team was so keen to reiterate, this is a big horse, huge work in progress, hurdling not his game, looking after him for a chasing campaign further down the line. When you hear statements like that, surely that doesn't mean that they're going to miss some big targets in the spring, does it?
They might do. They're sending out a warning shot, I suppose, that Cheltenham isn't priority this year, and they're probably right to think that way. But he won nicely in Newbury on his previous run, and he improved a lot. He was a lot sharper in Ascot for it. And the point that I loved at the race was when he jumped into it at the third last and came alive. Now he won nicely, but he had to work on the straight, and he's a chaser in the making. And I'd imagine even stepping up and trip wouldn't be an inconvenience for him either. So you'll see improvement again from this run. I think this is a real smart horse who's going the right way, and yeah, I think he's a big future. And like that, if he shows that improvement on his next run, that might change their mind as regards their targets in March.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you say that they fire out a warning shot like that, because it is that thing of, they obviously want to look after him, but at the same time, it must be so tempting when you've got a horse of that ability, not just to aim for the stars slightly. But anyway, we'll see what happens with him. Let's move on to the action over in Ireland, because relatively quiet over there, but Sir Gerhard is now 5-2 for the champion bumper with Bet365, Barry. Unbeaten still. What did you make of him?
You'd have to be impressed. You'd think for a second across the top before he turned in that Jamie was just giving him a little squeeze and you could get a bit anxious, but he quickened in the straight. And I know he was very much, he enjoyed soft ground, but he showed great pace as well. So he's also got age on his side too. So he's going to be going to Cheltenham with a lot of age, a lot of experience and a lot of class. So he's a worthy favourite, but whether you want to take 5-2 on him, I couldn't say. But it was a very impressive performance.
Short enough, isn't it, when you think about it? But yeah, impressive all the same. And Tony, over to you, because Bob Ollinger's now off the mark over hurdles and is 12-1 for the Ballymore with Bet365. Pretty decent performance as well. What was your summary of that race, please?
Yeah, a little bit of an egg and spoon race for him. The one takeaway I would have with him a little bit is that I'm not quite sure he's a 2.5 miler. I know he's coming from a point-to-point background. I think he's actually quite a fast horse. He hurdles quite fast. By the nature of him not winning his maiden first time out, he has now been forced into a maiden hurdle in the middle of December, which kind of means he's probably going to run back at Naas, I'd say in early January, over 2.5. I'm not sure that'll be ideal at a stiff track on possibly soft ground. I suppose the more obvious trial for that race run at Navan on Friday was the graded Novice Hurdle. It was a funny race, kind of fell apart a bit. Holy Macapony didn't show up at all, and some of the other protagonists, to be honest with you, it was wonky head carriages all over. Wonky head carriages all over the place. Like the Willie Mullins horse, Chris Jones owns as quite a high head carriage out in front. Esky Lane has looked awful the last twice, holding his head off to the side. They went with the tongue tie on Friday. It didn't seem to work. He was at the same kind of crack. In fact, Yera isn't straightforward either. Although he would definitely have potential to come back up the 3 mile. Lazy sort of a horse, but I'd say maybe an Albert Bartlett might suit him, or a Slug might suit him. But the winner, Ashdale Bob, picking holes there and all the rest of them, I would credit Jessica Harrington. She has improved him out of all recognition this year. He started off last season very well behind Blue Sari. Looked like he was going to give Blue Sari a right race before running about coming to the last. Then a little bit disappointing in a couple of runs after that, but he looks a different horse this year, and he actually was a very impressive winner on Friday, to give him a bit of credit. Might be the sort of horse that's underrated. People say, no, he's only now second season novice hurdler. But yeah, I would actually be inclined to keep him on side. He looks actually quite decent, I say, and just that his back form may be held against him.
I like that, because I think when, like you say, people might be inclined with that particular race and the price he was and whatnot, and who disappointed, to definitely potentially put him on the fluky side. But it's interesting that you want to keep him on side. And then just referring back to Bob Ollinger, obviously Fernie Hollow beat Bob Ollinger, and that leads us to our off the fence section. A fence section in Off the Fence. Because Tony, one of the things you have taken a bit of offence to recently has been a bit of lack of trainer information, more interestingly on the likes of injuries to Fernie Hollow, and then what happened to Easy Work on the gallops as well. Just feeling that we're not hearing it from the right sources, is that right? Or we're not hearing it quick enough? What's your view on this?
Well, look, the entries for Leopardstown, I suppose the 5-day confirmations come out last week, and we're all kind of excited to see what's running. It's one of the best meetings of the year. But also we do find it kind of out a lot about the well-being of horses, which isn't always ideal, and we're looking for what horses that we're expected to see enter that aren't there. Fernie Hollow was one. and Easy Work was the other one, and there were a few other ones there that that people may be interested in. She Wears It Well, I think, was another one, and some of the Unaccepted and Elixir Daniels of the world, and so on. I'm disappointed that we're in an information vacuum in the period after that about the well-being of these horses. It's not good. It's just not a good look. We've these fake Twitter accounts putting out nonsense where the horse is well, the horse is unwell, all this kind of stuff. Really, we need to get this together and have things done right in the sport. We're obsessed with Cheltenham. It's an absolute behemoth at this stage, and these key horses, it's important that the public kind of know about them. There's no big massive betting edge. Like, no one's going on Betfair or any exchanges laying these things for fortunes that they aren't running in races. There might be a small few quid, you may be unscrupulous people. It's more just the public want to know. It's information. Part of it, I suppose, is the race and news journalist thing. They need maybe to be following up fairly quickly with this. Like Patrick Mullins, Willie Mullins, Gordon, all these guys are doing interviews left, right and centre. Just come out and ask them. But also it is on the trainers and those connected with them as well. Like, they know the interest that are in these horses. To me, it's a thing that you get on to the owner, you let them know what's going on. We don't know, I'm not saying this that we need to know every single nick and knack that's gone wrong with a horse. Of course we don't need to know that, we've no right to know that. But these major horses, when they're having setbacks where they're out for seasons like Fernie Hollow and they're dead, like Easy Work, I think that stuff has to really be in the public. It's just not a great look for the sport from a fan point of view, and it needs to be done in the right way. Like, again, some of these trainers have lineups with bookies and stuff like that doing columns. I don't have a problem with those. I find some of them interesting, but we know that isn't the place for putting out the information about non-runners and stuff like that. We've seen the bother with that over the years. So trainers maybe themselves tweet it out, do the thing right. There are some trainers actually in the UK who are really good at this, getting the information out there and keeping a very tight ship. So yeah, it's a bit like the fog thing from a few weeks ago. It's just like shooting yourself in the foot. It seems something that can be so easily avoided if people are thinking.
No, I hard to argue with that case. I think in this day and age, having a clear public perception is kind of key. But it means that we can now move on. It's no question time this week because we're actually going to do a Christmas special and we're going to answer all of your questions, or loads of your questions anyway. We've picked out the best ones, and thank you for getting in contact. That is great. And so Christmas edition of this show will be coming out very shortly in the next week or so, and loads of your questions will be answered then. And that means that we have left plenty of time to look ahead to the Christmas action, because of course there is so much to look forward to, and what better place to start than the King George, where we get to see Clan Des Obeaux, Cyrname, the Paul Nicholls Big Two lineup in that race and taking them on, Lost in Translation, and a host of other horses in there as well. Barry, straight over to you. For me, I can't get away from Clan Des Obeaux. I think he had a perfect prep run in many ways. I think his prep run was in the Betfair was potentially better than what I expected him to run like on seasonal debut, and he's going for the hat-trick bid, of course, but I don't know, I can't have Cyrname against him here. What's your view on this race? Who are you looking at? Who are you siding with? Talk to me.
No, I'd be with you on that. I thought it was a great run in Haydock, and ground was very soft on his first run. He usually improves for his first run. So for me, he was Bristol de Mayo was a great performance, but the horse we're going to take out was Clan Des Obeaux for the King George. I rode in the race last year and it didn't ride the hottest renewal, but I thought his run in Haydock this year was really good. And for me, he's the one to beat, and he's head and shoulders above them. I'd agree with you on Cyrname. He's got this elevated mark, unbeaten, waiting patiently in Ascot. Although he beat Altior there last year when Altior was having his first run of the season, which, if you like, confirmed the mark. But for me, he's never really lived up to that level of form, and beaten Vindication and Weatherby by a couple of lengths. I know he won comfortably, if you like, but still, I think if he's as good as his mark is, he should be beating him by a furlong. So I'd be happy to go with Clan Des Obeaux. I think he's the one, and I think a lot of people got raised eyebrows today when Santini was supplemented for the race at a cost of $5,000. There's a few different ways to look at this. $5,000, if he finishes in the first four, he's going to get his money back. He's also got a prep then between his run in Aintree and his run in the Cotswold Chase in January, and he's a horse who benefit from racing. But on the flip side of it as well, as regards what chance he has, everyone thinks he has no chance, but he was second in the Gold Cup in a slowly run race on reasonable ground. So it wouldn't be the greatest shock of the century to see Santini run a big race, and I think he'll get his $5,000 back and a bit with it. But as I say, it'll serve a purpose as regards to keep him busy between the spell of off between Aintree and his run in Cheltenham in January. So I think it's a good race. Lost in translation, obviously got beaten a furlong in Haydock, and he disappointed in the race last year when he had a wind problem. So, if he was to recapture his form, he would be a player. But I think Santini will run a good race, but Clan Des Obeaux is the one to beat.
Interesting Santini angle. I like that in many ways, because I think a lot of people have just put the fact that the track, the trip, the ground, whatever you want, people seem to be very negative on him at the moment. But you can't get away from the fact he was second in the Gold Cup, like you say. We got, like I say, with Bet365, Clan Des Obeaux 7-4, Cyrname 7-4, Lost in Translation is 8-1, Monley 9-1, 14's Bar. The rest, who do you guys think? Viewers, talk to us. Who do you think is going to run well in the King George? Who's your idea of the winner? Comment. We want to hear from you the whole time. The whole point of the show is that we hear from the viewers as much as possible. We read your comments. You'll see that At The Races always replies. And so comment in the box on YouTube or get in contact with us on Twitter. We love it all, basically. And now we can rattle on to, it's going to be a very big few days at Kempton for Nicky Henderson. It kind of always is. I'm sure he's used to the pressure. In many ways, I think Nicky Henderson can't still get nervous about running these nice horses. He's got Epatante in the Christmas Hurdle. He's got Altior in the Desert Orchid, and then of course he's got Shishkin stepping up as well. So plenty for him to look forward to. Just Barry, in terms of Nicky and his nerves, I think for anyone who doesn't know him, for the viewers out there, he's been here year in, year out. He's 70 this year. He's been training for decades, quite literally. But when you're down in his yard, and you'll be able to expand on this point more, he feels it all, doesn't he? He's so intensely involved with it all that I'd almost hate to be around him on a week like this run up to Kempton. How is he at home and to deal with when he's got the sort of weight of the world on his shoulders in some ways?
Well, I think when things are going smoothly, he's reasonably well. He's good. But if he's having problems with some of the big names going to a meeting like this, he's going to be up all hours, morning and night, trying to do all he can to get his horse there. But no, he's very much, he lives it, he breathes it, he sleeps it, everything. So, it's a big week for him. But if his horses are in good shape going there, he's reasonably calm about it. But he's got a big squad going, as you said, Epatante, Shishkin, Altior, and they're all obviously strong favourites, and you'd like to think should take the beating. Epatante, her performance in the fighting fifth, there's no reason to say that there's anything that's going to beat her. She won the race last year in Kempton. Track suits her. The ground is probably slightly better, which is even more so in her favour. So it's very hard to see anything trouble her. Shishkin put in a great performance when he won there as well on his first number of fences. So he goes in the wayward lad. And like that, the opposition should be well off him. Gumball was running well when he fell in Cheltenham, but even coming there on the back of a fall isn't ideal. So I don't see anyone troubling him. As regards the Desert Orchid for Altior, it's a competitive race, and there's going to be a good bit of pace, and his main dangers probably put the kettle on is probably the main one, but whether she'll be able to travel over from Ireland with the way restrictions are going now, I'm not so sure. But
God, that'd be disappointing. I didn't even think of that. Jesus.
Yeah, so there's a lot of question marks over that, but it's a competitive race. But I think the pace of the race, albeit it probably isn't Altior's track at this stage of his career, but it's going to be so competitive, there's going to be so much pace, that's going to play to his strengths, because he wants to test the stamina around there. Whereas if they were to go slow, he would be vulnerable to speed, but I don't think there'd be anything capable to beat him. But I think a good true run race is only going to suit him. So I'd like to think Nicky will have his big three home from Kempton, all after being in the winners enclosure.
Wow, like it. Very positive indeed. The one question I wanted to ask about Altior just before we move on, from your point of view, Barry, what, it's this long-awaited return, and we know if he's at his best and everything you've just expanded on there about the pace of the race and the style of his running, a win is what everyone's looking for. But if he finishes a good second, is that, the public will view that as disappointing, but in terms of a stepping stone back from a long time off the track, well, a fair while off the track, and looking ahead to building him towards the champion chase, would him being beaten at Kempton be the end of the world, is I guess my question to you.
I suppose the style of how it all happens, would give you the answer to that, really. If he gets caught a little bit for pace and he's just touched off, that's a good run, he'll improve for it. But I'd like to think with the time between what he was supposed to run the Tingle Creek, and he wouldn't have been far off being 100% fit, but obviously Nicky was just a bit mindful to protect him, and he was right, as we've discussed before. But he's going to have improved since then. He'll have done a lot more work, so I'd like to think fitness wouldn't be a major issue for him. So if he's back to himself, I don't see any reason why he shouldn't win this. I think he's better than the opposition, so I'd be surprised if he gets beaten. But you never know, it's horse racing. Age is probably slightly against him at this stage for such a sharp track as Kempton, whereas a stiffer track would play to his strengths, but I think he has the class to overcome that.
Right, like it. So that is Shishkin, Epatante and Altior. Very positive bulletins, all big days for them. But I think we can move on and look ahead to Ireland because, of course, Leopardstown, our focus will shift from Kempton over to Leopardstown. And also, before we move on, viewers, what's your nap of the festive season? Who do you really fancy across both sides of the Irish Sea? Again, get involved. Let us know in the comments who your nap of the Christmas period is at Kempton or beyond. Do you think all three of those Nicky Henderson stars will win? I personally do, actually. Barry clearly does as well, so that's all good. But let's move on to Ireland and Barry to the Savills Chase, where this is going to be a hot enough race. I'm not entirely sure we have a vintage Gold Cup era as such, but Minella Indo presenting Percy, Delta Work, a Plutard, they're all in there. They may all line up, and it may not be, like I say, there might not be one absolute extreme star, but it is very, very competitive, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think these horses are getting the credit they deserve. I think they're a good bunch. Minella Indo could be very good. Allaho could be very good. They were second and third in the RSA last year. They were big runs, and Champ got up and won. It was a good race. Presenting Percy, who's probably been, he's had his issues in recent seasons, but for me, he was very impressive in Thurles. So I think he's the horse going forward.
Was that just fitness? Was that just the fitness edge that day? Seriously, I don't know how fit they have him. You're in the yard a little bit down at Gordon's. How much fitter than the rest of the field was he that day? Because that's what that win was put down to.
You could say that, but for me, it was the first time I saw him looking like a racehorse since he won the RSA. He's been knocking around and he's been running over horns.
The RSA.
Yeah, but for me that day in Thurles 2 miles 6 on Thurles isn't what you want for a stayer. He was taking on Kemboy and Monolly, two horses who would improve for the run, I know, but still they're pace horses. They could drop back to 2.5 mile and be very competitive. You shouldn't be dropping presenting Percy back to 2.5. So he was doing his best work from the last, but I thought it was the first sign of the presenting Percy that we were promised over the years. So for me, I think he could be the one to give the most to do. But it's a very competitive race. It's wide open. I say Minella Indo, Allaho, A Plutard. It's really, really competitive. So it's great action.
Yeah, it is. Tony, you're all aboard A Plutard here, aren't you?
Yeah, I think I've probably had an okay bet there the way things have panned out. He also, something else is coming in his favour. The ground is dry there at the minute. I couldn't believe that. Physically it's been raining for a fortnight, but they're half talking about water on the chase track in Leopardstown, so that's going to suit him more than a lot of the others. I was kind of maligning a horse there recently, Fakir Duderies, with a view to going up and strip, but he's actually a bit of a big price for this as well. I was just thinking about him a little bit further. He might like a bit of decent ground at this trip. He's not a mental one either. Just one little takeaway, I thought about the whole Santini thing, just to mention in relation to this race. Santini going to the King George, to me, two things spring to mind. First of all, it's kind of the JP McManus team getting away with Champ, I would say, a little bit. He's going to be the one going to the Cotswold, I would say. And also, it would say to me a little bit that they may think Champ is a better horse than Santini at this point, which is not really reflected in the Gold Cup betting at the minute. I think he's 2 or 4 points bigger. It's just something to maybe to bear in mind.
That's an interesting angle.
Yeah, that was just something that sprang to mind, that he may be becoming the number one now. That often is the way of the Gold Cup anyway. You want to be on the horse that hasn't run in the race before rather than the one maybe that has and failed. Now, there is the odd horse, but it is the very odd horse. It has to be an extra special horse to come back and be beaten in the Gold Cup and go and win one afterwards.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's stick with you and move on to the Matheson hurdle, because we're going to have St. Roi there, Abacadabras, Aspai Tower. Again, another very competitive division. I know we've just been talking about a lack of competitiveness in terms of some of these races, but over in Ireland over the Christmas period, it's actually going to be very competitive. Who are you siding with here? I mean, I want St. Roi to drop the bridle a bit, settle, and I think he should be able to win something like this. But I know you're against him, aren't you?
Yeah, brilliant race this, and they won't even all need to turn up for this to be a brilliant race. I don't have a strong opinion on what I'm going to back in this race, but I would like to be against St. Roi. I think he's a little bit short. I kind of favour it as the minute. Like, he's a horse that does things a little bit wrong. There's loads of potentially interesting horses here. Like Abacadabras did beat him the last day. You can argue he was in front too soon. He jumped pretty poorly himself too. He doesn't really like heavy ground. Aspire Tower beat Abacadabras and Jason the Militant up north. They ran basically to the pound in the Morgiana, so why should Aspire Tower, who is from a yard who really tend to target this meeting in the last couple of years and was such an impressive winner at the meeting last year, and of course the horse that you maybe would be insulting to forget about him is the horse that's won the last two, Sharjah, and he'd love a bit of decent ground. That would be ideal for him. So this will be a cracker race, but the one thing I'll probably be guaranteed is that I won't be back in St. Roi anyway.
God, okay, I like that, and it's almost shocking that, like you say, I haven't even mentioned Sharjah in terms of that. Just sums up how competitive it's going to be. I guess a quick word then, we better move on to the novices. Barry, from your point of view with the novice chasers, we've got Monkfish and Asteria Falange and Felix Deji and a whole host of decent novices over in Ireland. You seem to be, there's a real depth in plenty of the divisions over there. Who are you just looking forward to seeing over the festive period? And I guess people want to have a winner. Who do you think will win one of those big grade ones?
Well, Monkfish was very impressive and furious, and the trip was going to suit him well, the 3 mile in Leopardstown, so you'd like to think he's going to take it out of beating there. He looks head and shoulders above. I think Asteria Falange, I think he's possibly good value in Limerick, because going right-handed's a big thing for him, and that race has caught up slightly, and I think it's very, very winnable for him. Loves soft ground, but as I say, going right-handed is so important for him. So for me, he's probably the one if you wanted to have a bet on. He could be one to have a look at. As regards Leopardstown, Felix Deji is well fancied for the 2 mile novice chase there, but I think Willie has an interesting runner. I'll try and Ener Gameen, is it? I think he won in Gorn back in November. He showed a lot of pace.
I'm going to let you roll with that pronunciation. It sounded good, Barry, and that's
I won't try it again. Say
it with a bit of confidence next time.
But yeah, he won like a horse with a lot of pace. And I just wondered about Felix Deji, when, albeit Size and Potsy's won since, but I thought Size and Potsy got away from him from 3 out to 2 out. And for me, he looked more like a horse who wanted a trip, whereas Willie's horse, he won like a horse with a lot of pace. So I think he's very interesting. There's probably not an awful lot between them in the betting, but and he's only had 2 runs over jumps and a bumper, so he's very little experience. But I thought he was just eye catching.
Very interesting. We can't say his name, but we will pop that in the notebook. Did you like the fact that actually that horse is on the running order? And I could even easily have rattled off mentioning his name, but I chose not to and I left it to Barry, because that's the sort of person I am. Tony, talking about Novice Hurdlers, again, very deep over in Ireland, plenty to look forward to, but I think the headline horse could well be Appreciate It for you anyway. Is that the horse you're most looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, kind of looking forward maybe to taking him on a bit if he goes in the 2 mile race. I think one knock-on effect of Fernie Hollow being out is that maybe that will force Appreciate It to go for the 2 mile grade 1. I suspect if Fernie Hollow had been right, he might have turned up here and Appreciate It might have went in the ace. Now that may still be the case, and Appreciate's form in Cork is after working out that Master McShee won very well the next day. I still, as I said, I've said before, a little bit of a knocking on of the champion bumper form, and I think there are a number of interesting horses in that 2 mile race. Ballyadam probably wouldn't be top of my list. I'd probably like to try and get him beaten as well. To me, the 2 interesting ones are Joseph O'Brien's horse that he got off the Heights, Kescon Risk. He did really well to win in Fairyhouse in a Stoley Run race the way he came from off the pace, quickened up really well, and he was a very impressive bump winner there. Back in January, I think it was. And Gordon Elliott's horse, who is only started racing in September, Call Me Lyrene. he won very well in Naas on ground he probably wouldn't have liked, and gone back on a bit of better ground at Leopard. There'd be 2 that I would have him behind. Like 5 days, you know, or the declarations, you just wouldn't know what. There's so many entered in this, you wouldn't know what will turn up. But if Appreciate It was over 2 miles on what's going to be quite decent ground, I think I'd like to oppose him.
Like it. You see, this is why we have Tony on, you see. He's just happy to take on those big guns. He's not going to jump on the bandwagon. Love it. Tony, I applaud you.
Well, we'll see about that. Although I would echo a lot of what Barry's saying about some of these other short ones. Like to me, Asterion for Lange, there wouldn't look like there's going to be an awful lot going to take him on in Limerick at this stage. Unless there's a possibility Gordon Elliott's might want to run pencil full of lead down there if they want to get soft ground from. Though would have thought he'd be more for a 3 miler. I think he'd definitely give Monkfish a bit of a race. And there you mean to me, I would just wonder now about him at Leopardstown around 2 miles on good ground. He's after running and goring over 2.5 and heavy now. He was brilliant that day. Very impressive. Simon Rowland's excellent piece on the website there, just on the sections there. But just, it's going to be a very different test for him. And we've seen before maybe impressive winners over 2.5 coming back to Leopardstown at Christmas. I think you want a really raw 2 miler for that race, ideally.
Yeah, great. Right, I'm taking all that on board in terms of the Irish action because I must say I've been mainly focused on the Brits, but we'll look forward to it all. Let's rattle on to our tracker horses, and boys, we're running out of time, so it's very quick lines on all of them. Mine is the mare Born in Boris, who made her chasing debut the other day for the Colin Tizard Yard. We know that they've been a bit in and out of form, and she actually travelled pretty well. She learned as she went. She was sort of stuffing slightly got knocked out of her about 2 or 3 from home. I just think that she's always quite lowly rated, and actually on that evidence I think she retains quite a bit of her hurdling ability. So Born in Boris is my tracker horse, although it's not been going entirely well for me thus far. Boys, I don't think you've been hung out to dry on the tracker horses thus far, because I'm not sure many of yours have actually run for you yet. But Barry, who's your tracker horse this week, please?
I thought No Ordinary Joe caught the eye behind my Drago in Ascot on Friday. It was a good run. He was having his first run over hurdles against a horse with more experience, obviously. Hit a little bit of a flat spot in Swindley Bottom, but came back on the bridle, and he was inexperienced, but he ran a good race and wasn't beaten all that far, so I think he's one to keep an eye on.
No Ordinary Joe for Barry. Geraghty, into the tracker we go. Tony, your tracker horse, please.
Percy Warner, trained by Gordon Elliott, won the maiden hurdle at Navan last Friday. Thought it was a good performance on the clock. The pace really seemed to lift down the back. He had a couple of keen horses that went on and put a bit of pace to it. Noel Mead's horse that was second would have travelled far better than the winner to the last. But Gordon Elliott's horse got a couple of really good jumps, second last and the last. And while he came off the bridle before the winner, Jack Kennedy was only hands and heels to ride him out to win. It looked like a horse that improved a lot. They pulled a long way clear the third, who was expensive enough purchase for Henry de Bromheads in his own right. So, and just actually continuing the theme here, Gordon Elliott this season has won 31 maiden hurdles in Ireland, which is a hell of a lot. Seems a lot of these young horses very expensive purchase. Henry de Bromhead's actually next in with 26, and Willie Mullen's only 20 at this point. Now that may well change over Christmas, but just goes to show you the young talent that Gordon Elliott has in his yard. This horse, a cheap purchase by his standard. I think he was only 100,000 out of a point to point. So by his standards, he really was shopping in the bargain bucket there.
Yeah, by his standards indeed. Not quite my bargain bucket, but anyway. I think that wraps up proceedings for us, because we've rattled through as much as we can. Hopefully we've given you some pointers for the festive season, whether it be winners or just some different angles, different ways to look at the races. I think we've given you a good bit of insight there. And get involved. Let us know what you thought of the show. Let us know what you think of some of the topics we've spoken about. We want to hear from you, so write in the comments box, subscribe to us on the YouTube channel, like us, retweet us, do whatever the hell you like basically, but give us some love essentially is what I'm asking for. And on that note, I'm going to bid you a very Merry Christmas. I'm going to say goodbye to Barry and Tony. We will be bringing you a Christmas special edition where we're going to answer loads of your questions and hopefully give you a bit more insight for the whole season in terms of what we have to look forward to as well leading up to Cheltenham. So that's it from me. This was Off the Fence.